I went a quarter century without ever watching or reading Lord of the Rings. I saw the memes, I mean of course I did, I don't know how you would miss that, like, one does not simply exist on the internet without seeing overplayed memes beaten to death nonstop, but I never watched LOTR until recently. Other than mild exposure to memes and hearing little things about the series here and there, I had 3 major experiences with this franchise. The first one was when I was a teenager. I saw the first Hobbit movie in theaters. Is that cheating? Do I still get to claim I hadn't seen LOTR if I watched one Hobbit movie? I don't care. I barely remember it anyway. I have very few takeaways from the movie. For example, that sure was Martin Freeman, and that sure was the Doctor Who guy, and there sure is one woman in this movie and she has like 1 minute of screen time and spends all of it staring in random directions and turning around dramatically. Other than that, I remember nothing about this movie. It was like sitting in my brain and it saw that it wasn't welcome, so it just got up and walked out. My second exposure is also from when I was a teen. I was in an EB Games and there was a demo of Lego Lord of the Rings and I was like, fuck it, why not? Because I was an adolescent and I needed visual stimulus. I was bad at the game. It is my deep and biting shame to admit that I had not yet earned my God Gamer status, and it was at a boss fight, the fight between Gandalf and Saruman. Why did I know that? Why did I, a lifelong non-LOTR fan, know that this was Gandalf versus Saruman? I'll tell you exactly why I knew that. I knew that because while I'm playing the demo, some guy walks up and like he stands beside me and he's watching me eat shit in the game and he goes, "That's Gandalf versus Saruman." And I'm like, yeah, I guess I don't really know anything about LOTR. And he goes, "Yep, Gandalf versus Saruman." And I hesitate. And then I go, "I'm not really into Gandalf versus Saruman." Now I'm silent. Twice was a fluke. 3 times is a pattern, and a pattern it is. That's Gandalf versus Saruman. Yeah, Gandalf versus Saruman. And at that point, I just put down the controller and walk away. My third exposure is from a few years ago. In 2018, I was with a couple of close friends at a university. Not a university any of us attended or ever have attended, mind you, don't ask. We were hanging out there and it was getting late and nobody was around, so we started poking around a little. Then in some corner of some hallway, we find a Lord of the Rings jigsaw puzzle. And in our youthful caprice, we decided to start assembling it. None of us knew shit about LOTR, so we just made up our own logic for it. There were 3 characters on this puzzle, and we dubbed the characters Oily Man, Elf Man, and Gremlin Man. I was fairly certain that Elf Man was Legolas, but I was scared of committing to that because there's just so many people in LOTR. Like, what if that turned out to be like Thranduil, or Sauron, or Hobbit? But we were doing this puzzle and we got really into it, like we were almost in a trance state, and it's getting really late and we refuse to go home until we're done the jigsaw puzzle. And we developed this system where we're just sifting through the pieces, trying to determine which parts are from which person so we can pass them to each other and work on them. We're just mindlessly going through these pieces, occasionally tossing them to each other and calling out, "Gremlin beard." As the night slides into obscurity, so too does our sense of humor. This was the funniest thing I had ever seen. This sent me into a fit of hysterics. There was a dark sort of chaos to the whole scenario, like a morbidity in the setup of building a puzzle whose source material is completely alien, toiling with the knowledge that only the completion of our labor will allow us to go home and go to bed. When we finished it, there was 1 piece missing. And of course there was. Of course there was. Every puzzle is missing a piece. No puzzle is complete without being incomplete. But we finished the puzzle, and we felt this inhuman joy, immeasurable pride. So we, built a shrine with some plastic succulents we found lying around, and then we left. We did not put the puzzle away, we just went home. I think I got home at around 3 a.m. that night, and there are no words in the English language to convey the emotion I associate with that moment. I have also seen some LOTR POV TikToks. YN and Elfman seem to have a very tumultuous relationship, and I hope they work things out. So recently, very recently, after the puzzle story was brought up, someone very dear to me suggested that we watch Lord of the Rings, just to clear up my understanding. And this was a mind-bending experience. I was raised vegetarian, and my first time watching Lord of the Rings feels exactly like my first time eating chicken at age 20. That's not to say that it was some amazing amazing thing that I'd been missing out on, more that it was this moment of, I've always been the only person that didn't get this, and now I am finally experiencing what everyone else has always known about, and that's weird. I don't need to give an in-depth plot summary, because let's be honest, you probably already know. I mean, even if you don't know, you know. It's a bunch of funny little guys on a funny little adventure to save the galaxy by throwing a funny little ring into a volcano. I watched the 3-hour director's cut, and the pacing is just all over the place. So much of what happens feels oddly hasty, and I get that it's trying to cover a lot of ground, but so many shots and scenes feel way tighter than what works, to the point that fairly simple sequences become delirious and blurry. It feels like the content of the movie is squeezed in, which is insane because its runtime is over an eighth of a day. There's also a consistent twee air about the movie. It's very whimsical in presentation, very Disney. Even serious scenes have a very Harry Potter sort of vibe to them. It's a kiddie movie. I kept finding myself thinking, well, so is this for like 12-year-olds or what? Not a bad thing, just not what I expected. Another observation. There was a meme every 5 minutes. Okay, how is it that every minute detail of this movie has been chewed up and spat into the internet ether, yet I never managed to know that Gandalf canonically smokes weed? The first half hour or so is spent in the twee little hobbit village. It's very rural idealist, very Heimat film, very cottagecore. If I wanted to stir the pot, I'd say that it reminded me of conservative appeals to the idealistic traditional life. Good thing pot stirring is something I'd never do. Also, for the record, Hobbitcore is absolutely an aesthetic community that exists, so you're now burdened with that knowledge. The plot kicks off when a local oldster Bilbo announces his retirement, which Elijah Wood reacts to by going... At Ganondorf's urging, Bilgewater leaves his spooky cursed ring to Elijah, but not before activating its goddamn tracking beacon, which causes the fucking Death Eaters to start chasing after it, which kickstarts Frodo's bizarre adventure. So in talking about the hastiness of the movie, there's the scene where Grandpa goes to meet Count Dracula and they have a little chit-chat about the situation. Christopher Lee seems to be on our side for about 20 seconds, then before we even get to know who he is, he turns out to be evil. Whoa, is that Black 13?
Holy shit, Dark Tower reference!
Oh shit, it's the only good Lord of the Rings meme. Okay, I've seen the meme video of the door thing like 3,000 times and I love it, but nobody ever told me that it's immediately followed by a geriatric force battle with serious sexual tension that culminates in Count Dooku forcing Dumbledore to breakdance. Gandalf versus Saruman. Gandalf gets stuck in a birdcage and it's like, why don't you just teleport out of there? You're a wizard. Everyone knows LOTR operates by D&D magic. Just cast Teleport King. He literally casts Animal Messenger. Is Gandalf a low-level wizard? That actually probably holds up because I've been told there's like 5 total wizards in this setting. So this is probably the kind of world where Mage Hand will blow someone's mind and Ray of Frost turns the tides of a war. Frodo and his friends experience a microaggression in a tavern, and that surely tells us something about this setting. Holy shit. Holy shit, it's Oily Man from The Puzzle. Frodo's hobbit friends are stupid and annoying and make suicidally bad decisions every few minutes. Something that bewilders me about this movie is that every now and then there's just a sequence that looks right out of a 2000s music video. Love the way the frame rate just drops to 10 FPS whenever there's a dramatic moment. Like the tension on the screen is just chewing up that RAM. There's a woman in this movie apparently, and she's kind of a girl boss. She does the fucking Tokyo drift on a horse. Frodo has this friend named Sam Homestuck, and every time they talk, I'm like, for God's sake, just kiss already. Like, I'm not saying I ship that or anything really, I'm just saying they need to stop beating around the bush and get to it. Speaking of kissing, Oily Man has a scene with Elf Girl Boss that reveals that they are a couple despite having zero chemistry. I hate the camera work in this scene. We are way too close to their faces. I feel like I've just been forced into a throuple against my will. I can literally feel this man's lice jumping onto me. Another thing I hate in this movie is the makeup work. They spared no expense in making Elijah Wood look like a porcelain doll, or in making the Matrix guy look like a vampire alien puppet. Then meanwhile, Count Dooku just looks profoundly elderly, like he's bearing all of the age and blemishes of every other character. He's like the Giver, but for facial topography. The most disturbing thing that happens in the Elf City is there's suddenly just another Oily Man, an exact doppelganger replica of him, and this is not an actual plot point for some reason. A fucking Xerox of this guy just shows up and hangs around and joins the party, and everyone pretends he's not obviously a failed clone. For the first few minutes of Oily Man number 2 being around, I literally just thought it was Oily Man number 1. I'm pretty sure one of them is named like Bottomy and the other one is named Vriska. Anytime they're on screen together, I turn into a Google algorithm scanning facial features and trying to form a profile, looking for any distinctions between these two men, and I draw a blank. I literally transmuted myself into a human rights violation and I couldn't figure this one out. And that was how I realized that doppelgangers are everywhere in this movie. Frofro's two friends, can't tell them apart. When everyone gets together, Oily Man number 2 is flanked by two of the same old man. What the fuck is going on? Where am I? Elfman and Gremlin Man show up at the same time. Neither of them, like, matter though. They just sort of blend into the crowd. I want nothing more than to know what Gremlin Man's entire deal is, but the movie will not let me in. It will not emphasize him. I want Gremlin. Give me Gremlin. Also, really proud of the knowledge that his official name actually is Gremlin. I was right that Elfman is Legolas. You know, he looks a lot like Zelda. Just kidding. Zelda's the princess. The hero's name is Metroid. I just want to talk about Legolas for a moment. Like, I've heard the name 5 million times over the years, but like, I never knew he was so quirky. I can't explain it. He's just kind of quirky and goofy. Like, he has weird girl energy. He's like a bug girl. Like the kind of girl that marries a cockroach, you know? He's like if Jennifer Lawrence was an elf and a bug girl. He's like if Metroid had 8th grader syndrome. So it turns out that Frodo has to take the ring to Hell Mountain because he's the only one who's pure of heart enough that the ring won't corrupt him. It's interesting that the framing of this movie suggests that all malice and avarice and quite frankly conflict is just rooted in this one ring to rule them all. It's not really that anyone is just greedy or just wants the ring for themselves. It's that the ring, which is a projection of Sauron, who might as well be the devil, has an actual psychic effect of temptation on people. And I might be misinterpreting that. I was half comatose for most of this movie, but I think it says something interesting about the moral setup here. What is the threshold past which someone is actually responsible for their actions? Oily Man also turns out to be important. There's a big rumination on how the human bloodlines are diluted, and humans have fallen into godless degeneracy, and Oily Man is the last man of royal blood, and he should just step up and claim his birthright and be the hero that the world needs. A great man, if you will. The Matrix guy casually drops that he's like over 3,000 years old, and it's like, what a horrible amount of time to be alive. We don't see a lot of the world from 3,000 years ago, but I kind of get the impression that very little has changed in that time. Little to no cultural growth or intermingling, little progression on basically any front. Why is it that anytime I start thinking about the setting as presented in this movie, I inevitably end up at, wow, this world is like a conservative's wet dream? Every time I look at Bilbo, I think, am I dreaming, or have I seen like a gif of this guy turning into a demon? Imagine my gratification on learning that it wasn't a dream. It was a nightmare. Merlin literally tries his absolute hardest to make everyone die in the snowy wasteland. Everyone keeps saying, let's turn back and take a different route, and this old slut is like, no, we need to die in the snow. We need to. And then he's like, Froyo, you decide. Do you want to die in the snow, or do you want to backtrack and take a different route? And he seems to genuinely think that Froyo is gonna take his side. Like, what did you expect? The door to the dwarven mines is sealed with a riddle, and the riddle is like, speak friend and enter. And I was like, haha, wouldn't it be funny if the way to open the door is to just say friend? Guess what the way to open the door is? The best goddamn riddle they could come up with is a moist little joke. A used teabag of a joke. Something I like about this movie is there's a lot of crying. A lot of just genuine crying and displays of emotion, and even when characters are being stoic, you can still tell they're hurting. I like that. It's a human touch. You know what else is a human touch? Humans touching the earth with their bare feet. Every time I have to see them walking through the filthiest environment barefoot, my skin crawls. They were in snow. Anyway, I enjoy the first chunk of this action sequence in the mines because for a couple minutes there's no music, and I find that makes it feel more visceral, more vicious. It's not pretty or glamorous or fun, it's desperate. It's a bunch of people just fighting for their lives. Then the music comes on and my interest starts wavering. I like it when Frogger gets stabbed, but he survives because his fucking gaudy rhinestone tunic absorbs the hit. It's not right to see a wizard just pull out a sword. It's not right, it's wrong. Use a magic missile, you bastard. What was that demon thing in the tunnels called? Was it Balrog? Was it called Balrog? I refuse to Google it. Gosh, I can't believe the wise old man would die in the first portion of the trilogy. I can't believe they just 100% killed him off and he's never going to come back in any form. Everything that happens after they pass the mountain is a blur. There's like a whole other elf city, Kate Blanchett. There's a lot of practical effects in this movie and I enjoy that. I have this haunting feeling that if the movie were made now, all the orcs would be CGI. I might be slightly frustrated by the state of cinema under capitalism. I knew there was something suspicious about Oily Man number 2. At least, I'm pretty sure this one is number 2. He has a shitty will save, Stan 3.5, and he gets all spooky influenced by the ring, and every time he looks at Elijah Wood, he hallucinates him as like a big roast turkey. Wait, do you roast turkeys? I was a vegetarian for 20 years, I never internalized a lot of this stuff. Oily Man looks sincerely heartbroken when his tethered finally dies. It's like he really understands that a piece of himself has just been killed. That's deep. So the movie ends with Jotaro and Sans on their romantic little canoe drifting off to their honeymoon. When this movie ended, I was exhausted. The last hour of it felt like the home stretch of a marathon. I was winded, I was panting, I was sobbing and bleeding. So what are my final observations? My findings, if you will. I have 3 primary observations. First, this plot is so monomythic, it's not even funny. Like, if there was gonna be one cultural touchstone that could dethrone Star Wars for the title of Hero's Journey Actualization, it would probably be this. Second, this is one of the most sexless movies I've ever seen. I probably need to elaborate on that one, don't I? I'm not saying I want this movie to be a porno or anything. That would be horrible. And let's be honest, if you go digging, you can probably find, like, Lord of the Dicks. And I mean, sexual and erotic are 2 entirely different concepts, but that's a subject for another day. Because when I say this movie is sexless, it's just a polemic way of saying it's devoid of real, raw interpersonality. I joked about the wizard tension, but like, other than the charming dynamic of Frodo and Sam, which I call romantic but is definitely not meant to be read that way, and occasional moments between Frodo and Gandalf, there is no interaction, be it romantic, platonic, whatever, that feels in any way genuine or compelling. Even Oily Man and Elf Lady, as I said, have 0 chemistry. That leads us into the 3rd observation. I can unfortunately see a very clear through line from this to the MCU. There's a sort of commercialist pragmatism that's been sculpting blockbuster cinema in the last couple decades, and you can definitely trace it to this and Harry Potter and the Star Wars prequels. So much of the presentation of this movie, the cinematography, direction, acting, set design, dialogue, reminded me of Harry Potter. It reminded me of the Marvel assembly line. Something about it, the big war scenes, the sometimes clunky choreography, the panning up special effects landscapes, like, look how sexy these graphics are. Like, if you were to take LOTR and scrape off any heart it has and desaturate it a little, you'd end up with Civil War. I can't keep thinking about this right now. I hope you liked the video. Check out my Twitter. See ya! Here are my predictions for Lord of the Rings 2. We're gonna get Gollum's backstory and see how he got the ring, and it'll be a really obvious metaphor for losing your virginity. The director is gonna get scared that Legolas and Gremlin seem a little too gay, so they're gonna give Gremlin a love interest who's like a sexy girl dwarf. Half the Fellowship is down, so they're gonna need to recruit a new character. I'm guessing it'll be either like a drow, a centaur, or a cat girl. It's gonna turn out that Saruman is the one creating all the clones, and the heroes will have to fight all of their own dark counterparts. And this last one is the one I'm most sure of. The title of the movie is a really blatant and callous reference to 9/11, so I can tell the movie's gonna do something really insensitive.